Well, welcome to the podcast, Gillian.
All right, Jack, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm really good. Been looking forward to this.
Me too. Do you
Yeah.
know, I am, especially because I've seen you do your talks. I don't know if you remember, do you remember the
Yes,
first
yeah.
time
Yeah.
we met was, gosh, it must be like 4 or 5 years ago now. I'm almost scared to say how long ago it is, but
Mm.
it was when you were doing a talk and you did a short film as well for the Falmouth University like film festival that they
Yeah.
had back in the day where we could do things like that. It
Yeah.
feels like
I can't remember
doesn't
that.
it feel like a whole different era?
Oh God, yeah.
But yeah, so I remember that was and it was highly entertaining, very funny.
Good, good.
And I remember thinking, oh yeah, it's not the last time we see a Jack
Well,
Perks.
we
Um,
we were plunked next to each other in a prezzo, I think. I think the society just sort of, and this is Gillian. I was like, oh right, okay. So
yeah,
no, it was good. It was good to kind of have a chat and eat some pizza, which is kind of
chat and a
what to.
pizza.
What more? What
Yeah,
more do you want in life?
well, there you go.
Well, I was looking into obviously a lot of people will know you from the Watchers, but a little bit earlier, and still today, voice work is what a lot of people will know you for as well. And I wondered, how does voice work differ from presenting on screen? Because obviously, people might think it's you're just talking without a camera, but I'm guessing there's a little bit more to it than that.
Wow, okay. That's a oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting that question. Now I've got to think.
I can edit out
Um,
the pause, Gillian, if you want
no, it's all good. This is
to.
like a pregnant pause. It's dramatic. No. Um, so interestingly, voiceover work was what I thought I would do. I never really imagined that would progress into presenting. So I to just do a quick rewind of like how I got to sitting chatting to you today, um, is I had worked in natural history filmmaking behind the camera and production. So I worked as researcher, assistant producer, then I was directing, producing, and that all kind of had a slightly abrupt halt when I had my first child, when I found out I was pregnant, basically, and then during that time, so while I've been doing production work, whenever we went out in the field, I would try and pick up stories for radio as well. Because I always found that we went off into the field to, film a very specific bit of behavior or cover a story for the production I was on. But there was always something going on and, in the wings, if you like, that I thought was almost more interesting than what we were filming. So I'd try and pick up those stories. So I did some radio presenting. I'll be really honest, I only got two commissioned in like 10 years of like hustling in that way, but there you go. But in those two programs, I remember somebody saying, oh, you got a really good voice for radio and you should do more of that. So that sort of seed was planted. And then when I became a mom and I'd sort of imagined I'd hung up my kind of, I was going to say my gloves. It's not boxing, but you know what I mean? My lens. I don't know, whatever you hang up when you decide you're not going to work in TV anymore. Um, I had this little thing of like, well, voiceover work is that thing. I really love the process of being in a recording booth. I love I mean, weirdly, as much as I love being outdoors and nature stuff, I actually really like being in a dark little cupboard, basically,
All
is what
right.
it is, like a soundproof cupboard. Really cozy space. The acoustics are so warm and gentle, and like just everything about it. It's like, yeah, it's cozy. And I like the sound of my own voice. Is that like a bad thing to
Well,
say?
I
But
wasn't going to say anything, but yeah, I can kind of get that from you, Gillian.
I can talk. I can definitely talk. So you can be honest, brutally honest. Um, so that's kind of how it started. Is I started doing voiceovers. I did a lot of stuff for free initially, um, and then off the back of sending my voiceover reel to producers and stuff, people started saying, "Oh, would you do on screen as well?" And at that point, because I had worked on productions with plenty of presenters, I was like, no way, no way. Like I see what people do to presenters. There's no way I'm saying yes to that. So it was a voiceover work that I imagined was going to be the thing I was going to do, right to the point where my social media handles and my website and everything is Gillian's voice, Gillian Burke voice. Because I literally it never occurred to me that that might change and something else would progress
Yeah.
from that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how it came about. And in terms of the difference, to answer your actual question, is the difference between presenting and voiceover. It's well, I mean, I described it already. Partly just the process of being in a recording studio, being in that environment. I love it. There's something that, so I'm fiddling with these earphones, they're popping out. I love it because I don't know, there's just like an element of, it's like theatrical, like, the inner
Yeah.
sort of like, sort of wannabe thespian in me kind of imagines I kind of swan into a recording studio and, like, hello, everybody. And they like give you water and things. And,
Well, there
really
must be a
lift you up.
definite skill to it because I guess you've got to know when to add the inflections and when to emphasize something. And it's not as simple as walking in and just going, oh, and now we see the ladybird. You've got to know how to sell it with your voice, I suppose.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that come with that for me anyway, and I don't know how other people have gone about it. So when I thought I might try and make a living out of recording my voice over things, I did do what everyone does is I went to a voice coach and I found that really, if I'm honest, like helpful and baffling all at the same time because it's almost like it deconstructed how I thought I speak and how I thought the
Okay.
voice works and how I thought I communicate. And a lot of it was, if I'm honest, I found it really hard to like even figure out what it was I was trying to be doing. So I actually found it in hindsight with, now more experience, I can lean back on what I was being told back then. But in the moment, I was like, I don't know how to access what I'm being told here. I don't know how to put into practice what I'm being taught. So that was quite frustrating initially. And I think it's mainly because I just was like, just make me sound great. That's all I was like,
It's all we
And of
all. It's
course,
all
it
we ever
never
want.
works like that. So just make me sound great. Um, so now, if I'm honest, especially if I'm doing just narration, which is as me, so I'm not doing, I don't know, character voice. I haven't had a chance to do that for a long time. Actually, I really miss doing that. But
When
if
you
it's
say
just
character
me,
voice, what's that? Sorry, just people don't know.
okay. So for a while before I started presenting, I was like a gun for hire voiceover artist.
Okay.
So
Okay.
someone would say, "Oh, we need something that's a bit more kind of a bit more mid-Atlantic or just leaning to the States, or we want something international no one can recognize, or so sometimes, yeah, I just had to try and sound like something else that wasn't
Okay.
me.
Okay.
I'm not great at accents, but I felt like I could do certain things because I went to an international school.
Right.
So I did the audiobook for a book called The Sudden Appearance of Hope, which is like a thriller. It's like a sort of futuristic thriller set like in the not too distant future. So a lot of it could actually be real. It's really cool.
Okay.
But there was like all sorts of voices. The story starts in Dubai, and then the hero, the heroine, who she ends up in this crazy sort of journey of intrigue, and it takes her through Korea to San Francisco, where else she goes, Italy. And so all these accents are coming through the book, and then right at the end, literally of a 400-page novel, the last 50 pages, they bring in a Scottish accent, and I was just like, no. I'm really bad at British regional, so I'm not even going to attempt it.
I was going to say, let's
Um,
hear your Scottish accent,
no,
Gillian.
and I just was like, you kidding me? So I have done like all these other voices, and now I've got to do Scottish, and it's going to sound ridiculous, and everyone's going to laugh, which they did. But at least there was another sort of 350 pages of the novel that kind of carried it, so I got away with it. But so yeah, so that's what I mean about character. Whereas
Okay.
now,
Okay.
if I'm doing a voiceover for the Watchers or for natural history, generally it's just me as me.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, like for me, there's no tricks there, other than, just knowing kind of that your breathing can be affected if you're overthinking and or maybe nervous even. But other than that, for me, it's just pure emotion.
Yeah.
It is really about like getting behind sort of, so what is this scene trying to do? What does the producer want people to take away from this moment? And I think that's what I genuinely try and give when I'm doing a voiceover. And it's possible to overcook it and sound a little over emotional. So it's just getting that tone right. But that's the beauty of working in that studio environment where you've got the sound technician, your producer, director, who, all sitting in, giving feedback. And I love that. I love that process. I really don't mind people going, okay, so that was a bit much,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, take it back a bit. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I enjoy the challenge of, say a producer will say, that's what I want is for someone to feel, and then the words are missing, because this is like a really weird space that I think that as filmmakers and creators are trying to work in, is like, how do you make someone feel something? Not in a manipulative way, not in a cynical way, but we're trying to share this moment. What is it? And is it the music? Is it what is happening here? So I love it. To me, it's like it's a real collaborative process. Um, so yeah, that's what I miss in these COVID times of recording from home on my own, is that,
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
that any good?
definitely.
No, it's really shit, Gillian, actually. And it's like, I have to kind of give myself my own feedback. I'm terrible.
Why not? You
So,
touched on it a little bit as well, but does it matter what accent you have for voiceover? Is it something that it's got to be received? I can't even say the fucking word. Receive pronunciate.
RP,
Receive
receive
pronunciation.
pronunciation.
Yeah,
Do you know,
because I guess if it's a so let's say it's a regional program about the Caribbean wildlife, that would make sense to maybe have someone with a Caribbean accent. Whereas if it's something about the Himalayas, would that take you out of it a little bit? I don't know. I guess it depends on the individual.
ah,
So something like that.
excellent question, Jack Perks.
Yeah. Whereas I mean, because like you say, because you grew up, you grew up all over the place, didn't you? From what I believe, you've lived in lots of different countries, so um, you've not got a strong accent from what I can from mine. Not that my ear's great at picking these things up anyway. So I guess that lends quite well for voiceover because it's neutral. I'm trying to think of the right word. Neutral is a good way of putting it. Whereas I guess, or like let's take Yolo for example. If it's a Welsh wildlife program, it would make total sense to have Yolo in there talking about that. But then yeah, like, I don't know if it's a Australian rainforest, but then he's a fantastic natural history person anyway. So maybe it would make sense. I don't know. I'll chuck it to you.
My goodness, these are great questions. And yeah, it does make a difference. But it's not always in the way that people think.
Yeah,
So, Yolo like, he is, as you say, a brilliant naturalist, great field guide, great storyteller. So if he was like, this is me taking you on with me on this journey to, um, I don't know, let's say Gambia, let's
yeah,
say, and then I would go along for the ride, because it's YOLO,
yeah,
or whoever, um that it's clear that this is interpreting a journey and all the experiences through the lens of a Welsh
yeah,
man from mid Wales, so that's okay. I think where for me it starts to stray into why this voice is when it's a kind of disembodied voice. It's
okay,
just a voice
yeah,
that's narrating. And we're living in these like crazy times, where um as like I the way I put it is, literally every single earthly system is being stress tested at the moment, like from climate to individual species, habitats, legal systems, food supply chains, like the whole thing is being stress tested at the moment, um, which is kind of scary, but it's also like, whoa, so this is an interesting time, because as a result, and I think, like, as humans, like, we're like storytelling machines basically, right? So when things start to bend and flex, and under this strain that we're experiencing, which is kind of a multiple, like, you know it's like, it's climate, it's ecology, it's racial injustice, it's patriarchy, it's everything. Like, everything at the moment is shifting. So our storytelling, the way we perceive, the way we even travel, the way everything is shifting, it feels to me anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So your question, say 3-4 years ago would have just slipped through of like, that's an interesting question, but I'm not really, now I'm like, wow, that's a very loaded question actually, because a disembodied voice that is received pronunciation talking about Australian ecology, like the land, its animals, its plants, its systems. I don't know anymore, because it's like, who owns those stories? Who owns those narratives? And because of the accent, what lens are we viewing it through? And
it's a good way of putting it.
Super important question. So, for me, it would be a case by case basis. I mean, I'm born in Kenya, as you've done your research, Jack. Yes, I have lived in lots of places.
Well, I read Wiki.
Was that it? Oh,
no. I did a little bit more digging.
Like...
No, I did. I'll give myself a bit more credit. I did do a bit more digging than that.
So, I mean, I would say that I was born in Kenya.
Yeah.
I lived there until I was 10. My family still live there. I go back a lot, and I've only ever seen programs about the country I was born in, the country that I experienced firsthand, through the lens of other people. And that's problematic, because like even the naming of animals, which I kind of find weird anyway, but when you've got an elephant called David, it's like, who, it's subtle, but when I think about it now, like I didn't question it for years, but I do sort of think, oh God, that's really changed.
But it should have had a Kenyan name rather than a
or I don't even know.
Yeah.
It's like, it's actually the naming of it. It's still a kind of like ownership. So, to me, it goes real deep, all this stuff.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Like, right to the point where I find that, what we're really, ultimately what we're really looking at is like, well, when we talk about connecting with nature, what we immediately are doing is separating ourselves from it.
Yeah.
Because in order to connect with it, we've had to be separated from it in the first place. So for me, like, just like as you start to kind of take apart, like, okay, so who's going to tell this story? How are they going to tell it? What does this voice believe of the world? How does this voice see the world? And all those things trickle down into how, how the voiceless are represented, and the voiceless being the plants, the animals, the everything, life on Earth. So it's a big responsibility. God damn it! Now I'm like, I'm done.
I'm sorry, I've got a few more to go. Yeah, sorry,
oh,
Gillian.
Really? Okay. I was like, that's like a day's work.
Yeah. Well, we'll go a little bit more lighthearted now, because you mentioned that you've lived all over the place, but you're now living in Cornwall. So I wondered what drew you to Cornwall.
So I'm going to pour coffee. It's going to sound weird.
No, it's fine. You go for it.
Okay. I'm not doing a wee. Because that's what it sounds like on the headphones.
I wouldn't judge you if you were, Gillian.
There's a coffee, just as proof.
Yeah, okay.
I'll drink it too, just to prove. But anyway, sorry, that's very inappropriate.
No, it's fine. If you've listened, well, I'm assuming you haven't listened to any of these podcasts. It can go a lot worse than that, so don't worry at all.
Thank God. Okay, I'm in good company then.
No, I tend not to censor anything. It's all balls out podcast basically. So yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, but yeah, Cornwall. What drew you to live there? Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. Okay. There's no sensible answer to this question. I kind of say it was the best decision I never made. So I basically followed my heart to Cornwall. Like my ex is wanted to live down here. He's was sort of surfing and all this stuff. So
yeah.
So that's how I ended up here. So it wasn't really like a kind of well thought out decision, to be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone down here. I had obviously like a lot of people visited a lot, spent a lot of time down here, but I quickly learned that it's not really. That is Cornwall, obviously, but there's a lot more to Cornwall than that.
Yeah.
So I ended up staying because my kids basically, by the time, the ex became the ex, they were pretty settled in school.
Yeah.
So I just was like, well, I don't know what to do. But actually, if I'm honest, I really like it here. It's, it's for the obvious. Oh, hang on.
Go on, you go.
Delivery at the door.
You
might need to press pause on this.
It's all right. You go for it.
Just give me a second. Yeah, give me a second. I'll leave it outside. Oh, for God's sake. 1 moment.
Just bear with us, folks. We'll get there. I thought you were going to have a punch up then,
the
Gillian.
grumpiest postman. He was going boom, boom, boom. I was like, just.
I was sort of just going to see you and him having like going past the frame. Oh, God.
Honestly, I was just like, 2 seconds. I just need to find the key. Anyway.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It's sunny in Cornwall.
well, I was going to say it always is, but I can't remember if I used to live in Falmouth, so I lived there for 3 years. So I do miss. I'd love to. I've got to try and twist my wife's arm to get back down there at some point, maybe. But yeah, I did love the thing. People, and you probably sympathise with this a little bit. Everyone thinks it's always sunny, but it's quite miserable from. Well, all year it can be anyway. It can be quite. It's I forget is it mizzle they call it down there, where it's just like that real fine rain. Like you can get like a week of nice sun in the summer, but it's a lot of rain. I found when I lived down there.
Do you know what the Cornish Tourist Board will not thank us for this? But
no,
the bit that I find sad and funny at the same time is that we tend to get that really amazing kind of hot sunny weather about a month before the summer holidays begin, and literally the day the schools break up, it pisses it down.
Yeah, it does.
And then it'll just piss it down through the summer until like about the last week of September, first week of October, and then we just get that amazing burst of sunshine, and then October feels like summer again.
Yeah. I've been on the beach in February. I remember it being sunny enough to lie on the beach in Feb, and the sea's gin clear, and I'm like, what is going on? And then when it gets to May, June, it's fucking awful. So it's I don't know. Yeah. It's a weird one. I always ask this because I've had quite a few ex-Falmouthy people. Have you done Club I before? Have you been there? Do you know about Club I? I'm asking all the hard-hitting questions in this podcast, Gillian.
I have been known to frequent Club I.
Have you actually? Oh my goodness.
Oh my God. Do you know? Oh, I don't even know I should be admitting this. As one gets older and wiser, one tries not to end up in Club I, but every now and again, oh God, now I feel really nostalgic because like there's been none of this like for a whole year.
Yeah, I know.
But so yeah, I mean the worst thing is like when you bump, like this is small town living, okay? Yeah. But when you bump into your kids' teachers when you're out of a night. And they wish you weren't there, and you're just all like, we're just gonna pretend like we haven't seen each other here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like I'm sort of shifting into the age of just being that embarrassing mom now. You know,
embrace it, absolutely embrace it. But you know what? Club I's got quite a healthy natural history alumni. Like I know Steve Backshall's been in there. I know Lizzie Daly's. Obviously, she used to live there. So there's quite a good number. I mean, they're probably not aware of all these wonderful people that have been in there, but they should have a plaque on the side.
Photos on the wall.
Yeah, they should do. I think so. Yeah, I used to enjoy that place far too much when I lived down there, and I don't know. I think I'd be the kind of the weird guy by the back of the wall with a pint now. I'd be a little bit too old for it, but I don't know. I say that you get a couple of beers in you, and you're like,
exactly.
I'm young again. I can do this.
I know you. I've got the measure of you.
Yeah, I could do that. And I noticed. So I was looking on your website, and I noticed you've done. Whether this is a conscious thing, but you've done a lot of rock pool, like voice work and films. Are rock pools a particular interest, or is it just something that's kind of happened?
Like, well, I guess partly because of access. You know,
it's, of course, yeah.
It's on your doorstep. You can kind of, predict when you can go. There's certain aspects of it that make them rock pooling a really great thing to do. It's very accessible for other people as well.
Yeah.
I am by no means like a rock pooling expert.
Okay.
In fact, this is okay. Now we're going into another thing here, because I really struggle with how to say, well, quite often if I'm doing like, I don't know, a talk or something, and it was like, oh, well, how do we, introduce you? And I'll always say, okay, well, you know, Gillian, okay, so it's like I can never settle on one thing. So sometimes it's broadcaster, sometimes it's TV producer, sometimes it's presenter. But I'll say biologist because I'm like, I need to explain why, like why I'm here, right? But then I'll qualify going, but I haven't actually, been in like active research for about 2 decades. So I'm not really sure I deserve the title anymore. But anyway, biologist, there we go. And then almost inevitably, I'll go through this long explanation of how I think they could introduce me. And then they go, and ladies and gentlemen, it's naturalist, Gillian. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not a naturalist. And I've seen it in print. I've seen it and I just die a little death every time I see my name and someone says I'm a naturalist, because I'm not. Like, we said, YOLO's a naturalist. I mean, it's because for all sorts of reasons. It's
So I guess the definition of that then is that a naturalist is someone who's like has got a very deep knowledge of lots of things in nature. I guess that's the kind of broad term. Whereas you're interested in nature, would you say, but then you don't know every little bit about, say, a ladybird's leg or something like that. Is that a fair way of putting it? Or
so a ladybird's leg, I would say that's straying into biologist territory.
Okay.
Knowing all the different types of ladybird and knowing when they're on the wing and when they're in their larval stage, that's more of a naturalist.
So
a naturalist is someone who doesn't need a degree, in my view, or any formal education, but this is someone who, by virtue of spending time observing, recording, reading, observing, recording, reading over a vast amount of time, acquires this incredible knowledge of the individual components of a system and how they all fit together. How they fit together starts to stray into ecology, like the connectedness of everything. And then if it's down to, well, how does a ladybird move its leg? How does it power its wing? How does the air flow over its wing to get it airborne? That starts to, go into biomechanics and biology. So it's a really, like, for me, like the umbrella terms just don't do justice, like all the different fields and disciplines. So where do I fit in all of that? I still don't know.
I don't think any of us do half the time. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just someone who's, I guess, very curious.
Yeah.
And also someone who is really determined to break down the barriers or perceived barriers between what people think is, oh, well, I couldn't possibly know that because that's science.
Yeah.
Or that's like, what clever people do when they go to university. I'm like, no, not at all. So I guess ultimately I'm just like an envoy, like an ambassador.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I really love it. I mean, I think I'm kind of like just like an old hippie at heart, really.
I'll look out for that on the next Watcher series. Gillian Burke, old hippie.
Old hippie. I really am. And it's just getting worse as I get older.
Well, Cornwall's a place. If you're an ex-hippie, Cornwall is definitely the place to work.
Oh, no, I'm totally channeling it. Because I genuinely, there was a time when I keep this all hidden away, the kind of like the stuff that I do, which is in like my little sort of homage to, to the I don't even call it the natural world anymore, because I really want to try and like re-educate myself and how I use language, so that this idea that we're reconnecting with the world or the natural world, I'm like, no, we're in it. This is it. We are it. So like for me, okay, I'll give you some examples. Like if I get in the water, if I get in the sea, that for me is like a spiritual moment, because I genuinely feel, or I like to take a moment to think about, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sharing this. But anyway, I take a moment to think about the energy it's taken for that swell to reach me, the wind to reach me.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's like, on a kind of physical, scientific level, that is true. But like it then starts to become like more of a spiritual experience, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I am literally connecting with something on the other side of, the Atlantic, whatever ocean I'm in. And like, I'll take it a step further. Um, I I haven't been well, the two oceans I sort of feel like I know are the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. Atlantic because I live here, Indian Ocean because I grew up in Kenya. And my grandmothers came from Seychelles, so that's very Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
And to me, the quality of the energy, okay, guys, get ready for this. Literally can't believe I'm saying it. Is that the Indian Ocean is like mother energy, and the Atlantic Ocean is like brother energy. So
Okay.
they're different. Then,
Okay.
it's not just all seawater that's, got different salinities. And of course, you can measure it in those ways. But to me, they are still different. Like, and I don't know how to express that beyond, one has mother energy, one has brother energy. And I'm really fascinated with, and becoming increasingly fascinated with, like, different labels: indigenous knowledge systems, traditional ecological knowledge, the original people, whatever you want to call it. And that existed in Britain very much so. I'm really fascinated with, I guess, what is animism, the kind of the belief and knowledge systems and the way of understanding the world, which imbued everything with characteristics in life, in a way that I haven't been educated in, in the system I've been educated in. I haven't been brought up to think that way, but realizing that actually I was kind of born that way.
Yeah.
I really felt this before I had the words for it. And then I felt like I had to hide it away because it wasn't very scientific. And now I'm sort of going, oh no, I'm bringing this back,
I
because
think,
I find it fascinating.
yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of putting it, because I've spoken to a few. I spoke to David Lindo before, and he describes it as having the force. Like he can
Oh,
predict when birds are
really?
going to turn up. Yeah, he's like a birding Jedi, and a few people have had things, but yeah, and I think they are, because they're in this scientific community. They're ashamed in a way to say that, but I guess whatever it is, if it's working for you, then don't be ashamed of it. Just embrace it, I
Okay, I'm going to
suppose.
flip the tables on you and ask
Okay.
you about that. Do you get that when you're, fish whispering, or whatever you call it? I don't
Fish
know. But
twitching.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
twitching.
twitching.
Hang on, just pause because I have to plug my laptop in. This is
Yeah.
so unprofessional. I just
No, no,
realized it's
don't
about to
worry.
die a
Don't worry.
death.
It gives me time to think of a good answer now.
There we go. Ah, God, cable, tastic, everything's gonna fall over.
um,
Yeah. So do you ever get anything like that?
um,
You can say no.
no, no, I'm just trying to think really. I'm trying to way to describe it. I mean, there's certainly a joy. I don't know if it could be spiritual, I suppose. And this might be more of a mental health thing, but there's a recharge. It's like exhaling. So when I'm by a river, I just feel like the weight's being lifted of if I've got pressures or stresses or whatever.
Mm.
They might come back later, but they just go, even if it's just a little brief period. And I think being in the water, like you were saying, whether it's the sea, that whether it's the rush of cold water or that complete environmental change, it does improve your mood. But I know that's not quite what you're asking, but along those lines, I guess, is what I would say. So after this, I'm going to try and do some spawning pike. Not do. I'll reword that. Go and film. join in. I'm going to join in. I'm going to film some spawning pike hopefully this afternoon. But so I'm quite looking forward to that, because I've not been in the water properly this year yet. So I can't wait to do that.
That's so cool because I bet you have. Okay, so I tell you, like, when I was a researcher,
Yeah.
so long before I did the watches or even thought I was going to do anything like this, I was working on. I was writing a proposal. So I was working with a couple of scientists and writing a proposal about African rock art.
Okay.
And so it wasn't exactly about wildlife, but it was like, oh, this is something I can, find interesting. And I was helping the scientists kind of shape together part of the production company's kind of development work. And it was really fascinating because it was an area like that I had very little knowledge of or experience of. And I had obviously known about the caves in Lascaux and rock art in other parts of Europe, but I didn't realize that there is like right across the the whole of the African continent some different examples and eras and types and meanings and styles and all that kind of stuff. So I was reading a paper about the rock art of an area of the Kalahari where the Sand Bushmen are, and and the paper was looking at the significance of these rock art sites in present day communities, and particularly around the ritual of the Eland Hunt. Now, I don't know how much you know about the Eland Hunt. I'm
Not a
guessing not
great
much.
deal, no, if I'm honest.
So, like, I mean, they're huge antelope, So, they traditionally, I think, are still hunted with on, so the men will go out on foot with spears, bows, and arrows. And because of the size of the animal, what they have to do is, sort of stalk it over many days. And it's a little bit, I guess, like um, an exercise of endurance and stamina.
Okay.
There's also great risk as well to the hunters, as well as obviously the hunted. And this is, I guess for some people, maybe not a very palatable story, but this is the tradition, is what happens. So once this animal has been sort of worn down by being stalked and just kind of, it's almost like a mind game. It knows it's being, and it just cannot shake him off. They eventually find the moment to spear it and kill it, and then that's it's more than just getting food. It's a ritual.
Yeah.
There's reverence, and part of the process of beginning the Eland Hunt has like this shamanic ritual where the rock art is like a portal where the hunters will through like a ritual, they kind of go into an altered state of consciousness.
Okay.
So, long story, but I'm getting to the point here. The point that I found really fascinating was the anthropologist whose paper this was describing this whole ritual and how it works. And in his conclusion, he said that what he had been able to deduce is that this system of shamanic ritual and traditional knowledge was as accurate in predicting animal behavior as any kind of modern biological theories.
Okay.
And at the time I read that, and I knew it had some significance, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I literally like banked almost that sentence, and it really frustrates me because I cannot find the original paper, but I know one day I will. And I banked it, and that is now starting to come through in so much of the environmental activism that I follow and part of to a certain extent, but also in terms of like ecologists starting to recognize that there is real value in traditional ecological knowledge, in indigenous knowledge systems. And that's, quite often we think of these exotic sounding places, whether it's the Amazon, Australia.
Yeah.
But, that's true of Britain. That's true of Eastern Europe, places like Romania, where that knowledge is still very much in use. And so, yeah, ethnobiologists, ethnobotanists are really working in this area now where they're starting to assimilate and actually kind of look at models of how we understand the world works and how we predict what's going to happen in synchronicity and natural cycles and seasonality, and not just seasonality year on year, but from generation to generation. And that's the value of this knowledge, is it's actually handed down across generations. So to go back to when you go down to the river today,
Yeah.
Those feelings of like, oh, like David Linder's saying the force, he kind of knows when a bird's going to show up. I was asking you because Chris Conroy, who I'm sure you know, he's
I do know Chris,
friend of the Watches and responsible for pretty much all the amazing summer footage we get. I remember doing a day of filming with Chris where we were going to lay down sort of little GoPro cameras in the gravel beds.
Yeah, I saw that film. Yeah.
Yeah. And I tell you what I just found so fascinating was that there was something going on which was beyond Chris's kind of science head. Like he was reading the water, reading the gravel bed, and was his ability to predict where those salmon are going to spawn, not just where they're going to spawn, but where they're going to, carry out certain types of behavior, is phenomenal. And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's the hippie side of things,
Yeah.
where you start to be able to read something and you can't even explain how you know what you know. And so that's where I think, as anyone who's interested, whether it's because you're doing a degree or you're, a filmmaker, photographer, just someone who wants to have that benefit of being out in the natural world, like, pay attention to that sort of sixth sense, because there's real value in that. And that's something that, in a sense, has kept humans going for as long as there have been humans. So, would be wise to not lose it because it doesn't sound scientific.
Yeah. No.
I mean, the science has absolutely is very, very important, but I feel like it could be balanced out a bit more.
Yeah. No, I agree, definitely. And we've mentioned the Watchers a couple of times now, so I wanted to talk about when you joined, because were you anxious at all? Because it's obviously become this kind of institution, and obviously at the time, I know you started before Martin left, so it wasn't like Martin got when you came in. There was a bit of a mixing there, but there were a few hardcore fans who were quite vocal. Maybe they didn't know all the facts behind it about him leaving and you joining. But was there any pressure? Were you worried at all, or was it just roll up and kind of crack on with it?
Sorry, I'm trying so hard to suppress my laughter. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I bet.
Okay, so I've been asked this a lot actually recently.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to bring it up again.
No, it's all right. It's all good. It's partly annoying because my earphones keep popping out. But so when I joined the Watches, I wasn't really desperate to be a presenter. What I was desperate to do was to try and get on TV, the medium that I understood and, to be honest, had the only real experience of in my professional life. I was really keen to start telling more honest stories about the state of the environment. So there's a little bit of backstory here. So, like I said, I'd worked in production behind the camera, and I'd never wanted to be a presenter because my understanding of the role and
it's
the way
funny how many
productions
presenters say, sorry to interrupt, but it's funny how many presenters say that. Very, very few ever say, I always wanted to be a presenter and I became a presenter. It's always some hodgepodge circumstances that find their way to it.
Yeah, that's called life.
Yeah. Is that what that is?
Yeah. So I always felt that you have much more editorial control behind the lens. And I, to be honest, I think that's true still. But what happened is, once I'd had kids, I really thought that I was never going to be working in media again. I couldn't see how I was going to make the two things work. But as my kids got sort of to school age and a bit older, and at this point, I was single, so I was definitely like, okay, how am I going to make this work? I had a couple of things that happened. I had started, so I'd moved down to Cornwall by this point. I'd gotten really aware of plastic pollution in a way that I'd sort of understood in my head, and I'd read about it a lot. But living here and being, in a town that's by the sea, so I'm seeing the beach almost daily, particularly with my kids. I was like, holy shit, this is bad. This is way worse than I thought. And my first response was, well, I'm just going to do what like any concerned citizen does, which is I'm going to write to the council, because surely, so I became this like total nuisance caller with Cornwall Council. And it got a bit ranty, I won't lie. And especially about dog poo bags hanging in hedges. That like, baffles what? Me. Anyway. Yeah. So, at the same time, a really important paper came out. What was important to me, because it changed my kind of trajectory, was it was called An Open Letter to Humanity, A Second Notice. It was 25 years on from the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. So now we're in 2017. And this paper has been published. It's got like several thousand scientists as signatories. And it's basically going, in 1992, we knew shit was bad. It's gotten even worse in the 25 years. And what we're going to do about it. So the urgency of the climate and ecological crisis for me, that, I mean, I knew this stuff was going on, but that's when it landed viscerally. So those are the two things that basically that, so, you know, seeing plastic on beaches, this paper, and then the final ingredient was a little hermit crab rocking up
Okay.
on a beach, you know, in Cornwall, and one that had been extinct in Britain since the 60s, since a big
St.
oil
Piran's.
spill, St. Piran's crab.
Yeah, Piran's. Yeah, yeah.
So I'd gotten frustrated and realized I'm not going to get anywhere by just calling the council every single day and complaining about the amount of plastic I'm seeing. I had sort of escalated that in my head to going to Cornwall Wildlife Trust, to Surfers Against Sewage, like all the local organizations that I knew. And that's how I got sort of how I then heard about this story about this hermit crab. And I thought, well, God damn, if there's ever a good news story, that's got to be it. So I took it to the Watchers because at the time it was the only place I could see that might take a story like that. And sure enough, they did. So that is how I got my first gig.
Yeah.
And and then there was like a kind of, I can't remember what they called it. I think it was like called Presenters Boot Camp or something, but they had held
Okay.
an event where, you know, loads of people had gone in to, I guess it was like an audition. I didn't think of it at the time, but I guess it was like an audition. So one of the producers had said, you know, this would be really great. There's nothing to lose. You just go there, you know, it's a day of just doing screen tests and da 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 da. So I did that, and that sort of all kind of aligned. You know, they were like, well, you know, we think this would be a really great thing. And so I did my St. Piran's crab item and a couple of others. And then really at that point, I was just like, I'm loving this because I found a place where I can actually tell the stories that I think matter in the way that I like to tell them. And when the whole kind of, when everything kicked off, and I think it was mainly on Twitter,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that was what I was not prepared for, because in my mind I was like, well, I've done a biology degree, I've worked in this industry for 15 years. I was born, like, you know, in an environment where there was no question, like, you know, my mom worked for the environmental program, my dad was very outdoorsy. You know, my whole life has been in some shape or form been about the world we live in and how to make it a better place. And I literally was not prepared for how my, I guess, credentials were going to be questioned
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah.
And it really knocked my confidence. I can see the difference in sort of like when I watch my presenting pieces up until that point, and then everything after that point, I'm like, holy crap, okay, that got you. But to be honest, you know, Jack, like, I only talk about it now. At the time, I was like, what do I do about this? You know,
Yeah.
do I give it energy? Do I give it life? Or do I just do my thing? And so my approach to all of that was I just didn't look at Twitter. In fact, I don't have a Twitter account anymore.
No, I think that's a sensible thing.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
was just
It
like,
can
is
be a
this
toxic
making,
environment.
oh my gosh, I was like, this is
Yeah.
not making my life any better. So yeah, so I just didn't look, and I just had this attitude of like, I'm just going to do my job and carry on caring what I care about. And, you know, and that's it basically.
Yeah. Are you finding
So
it's better now? I'm guessing like there's more people have warmed up to you. There's been enough time, surely.
I don't know is the answer, because I still
No.
don't look.
No. Okay.
But
Okay.
I love what I do. I
Yeah.
absolutely love what I do, and I really believe in in the need for um more honest
Yeah.
storytelling in this space. Um I'm talking about it more now because I feel like, you know, I'm at a point where I'm sort of looking at the kind of younger generations coming through, and for all sorts of reasons, whether it's the color of your skin, whether it's your gender identity, whether it's accents, whatever it is, there are going to be barriers, right? I really
Yeah.
believe that. And I just feel like I don't think the way I the way I dealt with all of that was got me through. But if I don't talk about it, then someone else is going to have to deal with it exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So that's not okay. Like, it got me through. It was my strategy. I just have this like mantra, which is I only have so many hours of the day and so much energy. That's like the currency I'm given every day when I wake up, and it's my choice of how I spend that currency. And I, as much as possible, try and make sure that however I use that time and energy, that I get to the end of the day and I feel good about my day. It doesn't always work, but anyway. So, it's a strategy that gets me through, but I don't see why everyone else has to go through the same thing.
Yeah.
Anytime someone does something that people just go, you don't deserve to be where you are, then it's like, no, we got to fix that. And I really feel that it can be done. I feel very hopeful when I look at kind of younger generations coming through.
Yeah, no, I think it's getting there. There's a lot of work that needs doing, and that kind of segues very nicely into my next question, which is, do you think there's a reason why we don't see so many people from BAM backgrounds on nature reserves or outdoors, and I guess by extension on TV as well, because it's still fairly white male middle class for a lot of it. And I know it's changing, but it is still fairly like that. So I just wondered if you thought there was a reason. We'll stick more with nature reserves for now, but like why is it when, so for example, I mean, I'm in Nottingham. If I go to the big nature reserve near me is Attenborough, and even though we do have large band communities in Nottinghamshire, it's very rare that you see that many people who aren't white, generally grey haired, staring at a lapwing or something. And I don't know I don't know if there should be a reason, but I don't know why that is, and I don't know if you've got any insight into that.
Yeah. So yeah, first of all, like the labels. So for me, language does really matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, I'm a Black woman. That's basically as simple as it gets.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole if I go with that one.
Okay.
I was just like, how long do we have, Gillian? So the honest answer is there's no single reason for that, in my opinion.
I'd
agree. I think the easiest way to explain to someone like why people don't feel welcome, for example, so anyone who's not white doesn't feel welcome, is and it wasn't just me, when I sort of joined the Watchers in the way that things played out, but I've seen other items on Country File, like any time. it just attracts so much toxicity and racism, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
That you're just like, really? Do I have to kind of explain to people that I'm not sure? The thing is, you're never even sure who it is that feels that way about you. And I think that's what's really what's very unnerving when if you're stepping into an environment that A, you're visible minority, B, you're not you're not necessarily sure if you're welcome there. And then there's also just the way that like talking about a nature reserve, the way the accepted way of having that experience is. So for me, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I find that there's only like very one or two ways that it seems acceptable to have an experience in a natural environment, which is to be there with a purpose, with a pair of binoculars, with your list, and to have that knowledge. And there is something deeply satisfying about like spotting something, identifying it, or not identifying it at the time, going back. So I'm not taking away from that experience, but it isn't the only way to do it.
No.
And I think that's one of the things that like the NGOs, the people that run the reserves, maybe fail to recognize it. It starts to feel like a club.
Yeah.
Because just by stepping
almost
into
clicky.
that space, the vocabulary, the kind of way to hang out, there's a way of being that is almost like taken for granted. But if you've not been exposed to that, if you've not been brought up in that, if it just feels really alien.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's sort the barriers are they're very obvious barriers. They're very upsetting and deeply upsetting barriers that are systemic, um, and we can go on and on about that. But one of the things that I like to talk about is just even it kind of leads back to what we were talking about earlier, which was the different ways of understanding how the world works around you.
yeah,
And when I say the world, I don't mean like the kind of human-made world. I mean the whole world.
yeah,
And one of the examples I use about my personal experience, because that's the thing I can speak with the most authority,
yeah, of course, yeah,
is I was born in Kenya. I lived there until I was 10. My family moved to Austria because my mom worked for the United Nations. And then at 18, I came to Britain. So I had this kind of, kind of childhood and adolescence in three parts, essentially. Um, and now I live in Britain. It's now where I've lived for the most of my adult life, actually my whole life now. And I present on a program about British wildlife. However, I still feel like I speak a second language when it comes to my ecological literacy.
yeah,
So an example is like an oak tree and a hazel. So if I try and, if I think about what those trees are, the best I can do in my brain is the outline of the leaves.
okay,
Okay. And in fact, the oak I see in real life, the hazel, the image I've got in my head is actually an illustration. It's a drawn image. It's probably something I've seen in a book somewhere.
yeah,
I don't conjure up a real hazel leaf when I
no,
think of hazel, right? So rewind to my childhood. Like right now, if someone, and I actually don't even know what the real English name for this tree is, but it's what we call monkey nut tree. It's not peanuts, but what we call monkey nut trees in
okay,
Kenya, the English name in Kenya. I can tell you right now what that tree smelled like. I know what the seeds feel like. They're covered in like fur. I know that when you peel off that fleshy, furry layer of seed, there's a hard nut inside. And when you crush that open, it smells like pepper. I know what the leaves smell like when you crush them and they've got furry underside. I know what the bark looks like and it's always covered in lichen. I have so much detail because I grew up in that environment and I was allowed to roam in that environment. Whereas I don't have that level of detail of anything in a British landscape.
yeah,
So that level of separation exists even before you're hitting into the kind of the identity politics stuff.
yeah,
And I think to me, like that's why I kind of really struggle with the label art because I'm not a naturalist. I can't walk into a British landscape and just reel off what everything is. I've learned a lot, but it's still like a second language. I still have to like pause for a moment and just reach for the word in my head, the name in my head, whatever's
yeah,
going on. Whereas and then the irony is because I left when I was so young, I have the experiential information in my head, but I don't have the names for things in my head for
no,
Kenyan wildlife.
no,
So, I know what a lot of things smell, taste, and feel like, but I can't tell you what they're called.
no. Well, you
But
sound a
here
bit
I
like a
kind of know the
naturalist.
names.
You just,
I know the names of stuff, but I can't tell you what they smell, taste, and feel like because I
yeah,
never had that childhood experience. So when we're talking about making the natural world more inclusive, I think for me, that's the level I want to be working at.
yeah,
If I'm going to take a group of kids out, I'm like, okay, forget the names of stuff. Let's figure out what this smells, tastes, and feels like.
yeah,
Obviously, if it's not poisonous and all that stuff, and do
yeah,
a health and safety kind of risk
yeah, yeah,
assessment.
yeah.
But you know what I'm talking
I
about.
guess it's just igniting that spark, isn't it? Just get
Mm.
them, and I think that's true as well. And I was really bad because I have talked to other people on the podcast about this. I can't remember who it was, but it's interesting that you say there are levels of interest. So people assume, right, you've got to know everything. You've got to know what bird that is, what bird that is. But surely, if someone is just walking with their partner or their family, and they go, "Oh, look at that," let's say it's a golden eye, but look at that duck, and they're enjoying it, then that's good as well because they're a person out enjoying nature. It doesn't matter that they don't know exactly what its name is and they don't know its scientific name. They're still experiencing that and enjoying it, and they may very well remember that and say, "Oh, do you remember when that duck did that funny dance, that display?" But
Mm.
surely that's just as important,
Yeah.
I would say.
I mean, I guess, just to answer your question about like, well, where are the barriers
Yeah,
for marginalized people that don't feel that the countryside and nature reserves welcome them or belong to them or any of those things. You know, there's a place to tackle that for sure. But you know, I'm very, you know, here's the old hippie again. I'm very much of the mind that you know, we arrive in this world without the identities of race and gender or any of those things. We're just like, you know, kind of souls, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the way that we get labeled, the way that we identify, will affect right from the get-go our opportunities in life, how we're going to get treated, how well, you know, our social mobility, you know, all those things, our health, like everything. It does. So it does. It's not that it doesn't matter. It really matters. But for me, like right now, we live in a space where there's a lot of otherness going on, you know, and our thinking is getting siloed, and people are like, well, I belong to this gang and you belong to that gang, and I don't know what to do with that, because like in my heart I'm like, okay, you know, I know that like on a soul to soul level, that, you know, when I'm out and I want to just share an experience with someone, like for me, this is how I'm going to do it. It's like, you know, if it's with kids, I'm like, let's make mud pies and decorate them with leaves and find seeds and da 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 da. And in that experience, I know they're learning something, because that's how I learned. And I realize that I actually have an amazing knowledge of you know, the detail of things, because I spend so much time playing like that. And I'm like, that's really important to me, that if I have that opportunity to interact with children, and, you know, not obviously COVID, but, you know, when I go into schools and all that sort of stuff, then I'm like, let's not worry about like how, you know, the bird feeders and how many birds are coming to the bird feeders. That's great stuff. I'm not saying it isn't, but let's like really get this stuff in, you know, like what it smells, tastes, and feels like.
Nature bathing. Is it nature bathing? Is that the term? Or
it's there's words for it, or you know, but it's kind of what we do. It's what humans. That's what we do. And so, you know, for me, that's like the level that you know, that's where like my soul's like, okay, you know, we're connecting, and then everything else, of course, there's work to be done. Definitely.
No, I know it's not a simple question, and if you not that I'm not trying to be a pun, but it's not black and white, is it? It's shades of grey, isn't it? So I think that's the way to look at it. Well, I'm going to end on this last question, and maybe this might bring the hippie out in you. But if you could speak with a teenage Gillian, what would you say to her? Probably go to Club I less, I would imagine.
Don't smoke.
God. Did you used to smoke, did you? Or still do, maybe?
No, I don't anymore. I managed to kick it after my second was born. But yeah, that was dumb.
Yeah.
I was really pointless. Yeah. But that's it.
Good advice. Okay.
don't do drugs.
Don't do... Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, God. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to have a good sit down and a chat with you, Gillian.
Oh, thanks so much. I love these, and really enjoyed having a chat with you, Jack.
No worries. Look,
and enjoy. I hope the pike perform.
So do I. So do I.
Good luck with that.
Fingers crossed. So look, take care.
Might we even see that on the watches?
Well, who knows?